As camera makers try to come up with their own unique take on the changeable lens mirrorless market, it's fun to see what they'll think of next. The Pentax Q-S1 is especially small and pocketable. It's feature-rich, and the images surprised me in a good way. Hi, I'm Larry Becker. Obviously, the folks at Pentax are interested in making a full-featured mirrorless camera that's even more pocketable than the competition. Let's run through it so that you can see if this might be just what you're looking for. We'll look at the feature set. I'll show you around the camera controls and the two lenses that came with my kit. We'll talk about the image and video quality, and then we'll wrap up with some miscellaneous observations and cool features. The Pentax Q-S1 has a 12.4 megapixel, 1/1.7 inch backlit CMOS sensor with a 4.6x crop factor. Pentax uses their Q-Engine image processor, and this nice little camera can capture up to 5 frames per second for quality RAW files. Now, at that speed, there is a limit of 5 images before the buffer fills up. However, if you drop to the lower frame rate of 1.5 frames per second, the limit is much higher at 100 total images. There's a built-in dust removal system, the camera can process in-camera HDR photos, and there's a host of consumer-friendly filters for in-camera image processing, and it delivers all kinds of creative, trendy looks. If you look at product shots of this camera, you don't really get a sense of just how small it is. But when you see somebody holding it, you get a better idea. This is a very small camera. However, the controls and camera handling are surprisingly good. Now, the only problem I ran into was accidentally pressing the exposure compensation button with my thumb from time to time. And speaking of the grip, my left hand has a natural tendency to land on top of the pop-up flash. But what's nice about the layout of this camera is the flash can fire even if you don't pop it up. And then you can pop it up so it has a little bit of extra clearance above the lens if you like. Where the fingers of your right hand grip the front of the camera, there's a round feature that looks like a dial. It's actually a front-facing infrared port. And there's also an infrared port in the back, but it's much more hidden. You can use an optional Pentax F or VELLO IRP1 infrared remote if you like. Also, on the face of the camera on the opposite side of the lens is a similarly sized dial, and it's called a quick dial. It gives you fast access to various types of pre-programmed post-processing in camera. And if you look through the manual a bit, you'll discover that you can reprogram each of the 4 quick dial settings so you can have it post-process in your favorite ways. On top of the camera, you can see 2 dials. The one with markings is the shooting mode dial, and the one with no markings is called the E dial. And it can change various settings based on your shooting mode or whatever is displayed on screen at the time. For instance, in playback mode, it allows you to zoom in and inspect your images. Even though this camera has a built-in flash, there's also a standard hot shoe for small flashes. And whether you're using the built-in pop-up flash or a Pentax-compatible hot shoe flash, this camera understands TTL through the lens flash metering. A couple of interesting things that you'll see on the back of the camera include the 3-inch 460,000 dot fixed LCD. It has an anti-reflective coating and a 170-degree viewing angle, which is especially important because there's no electronic viewfinder, and like I said, it is a fixed screen. The 4-way controller on the back has a good tactile feel, and it's not too small in spite of how small it looks. Just below that is the info button, and I love this feature because it gives you quick access to all kinds of important settings without a separate trip to the menus. There are a couple of doors on the camera that open on either side. One side, where the flash is where you put your battery, and the other side has the SD card slot. Because of how that door opens, I did find it a little difficult to remove my SD card from time to time. Finally, on the bottom of the camera, near the 1/4-20 mount socket, there's a rubber flap, and that covers the AV/computer connection port and the HDMI port. I got a couple of impressive little lenses with the kit I tested, and the first one is the 06 telephoto zoom. and that's a 15 to 45 millimeter f2.8 lens. Now, in terms of a 35 millimeter field of view, this lens is equivalent to a 70 to 209 millimeter lens. The zoom range of this lens is quite good, especially when you consider that this camera size is that of a point and shoot. I noticed on some of my images a little bit of chromatic aberration, but it wasn't especially bad, and I was able to easily correct it during post-processing with Photoshop's Camera Raw software and the built-in lens profiles. Now, the other lens I tested was the 02 standard zoom 5 to 15 millimeter f2.8 to 4.5 lens, which is an equivalent of a 23 to 70 millimeter lens. As just a walking around lens, I prefer this to the 06 model because the focal length is wider and the 06 lens requires twisting the zoom ring before it's ready to shoot. The 02 standard zoom lens has no such limitation, and you're ready to go as soon as you turn the camera on and remove the lens cap. Both of these lenses are Q-mount lenses, and there aren't very many of those at this point. That's why it's good news that these lenses perform well and deliver surprisingly sharp images and quick autofocus. At the very beginning of this video, I mentioned that I was surprised by this camera. Granted, I expected some nice performance with these little lenses, but I just don't expect especially crisp images from a point-and-shoot size sensor. I don't think I've ever seen better detail from a sensor this size. I noticed a high level of image noise even at lower ISOs like ISO 200 in sunshine, but because I shot in RAW, I was able to get better final images than in-camera processed JPEGs, and I love the fact that Pentax captures RAW files as DNG. So compatibility didn't require waiting for an update release to Adobe Camera Raw. Some of the reds were a bit oversaturated, which isn't surprising, but there was impressive color accuracy and shadow detail overall. And like I mentioned earlier, the minor amount of chromatic aberration was easily handled by just clicking a checkbox. This camera can film full HD video at 1080 30p, and it can continuously autofocus during filming. In my testing, the autofocusing worked best with moderate to bright light, but it wasn't quite as responsive in low light. And as you'd expect, low-light filming resulted in especially noisy video quality. So this is going to be a rig that you'll use for filming casual things and family events. One of the things I liked about the video performance of this particular camera is that it uses sensor shift shake reduction to sharpen images. Now that's for both still and video capture. And the steadiness of the videos I captured handheld was surprisingly smooth. Just keep in mind, this is one of those cameras that delivers the best possible video when there's a lot of light and very slow or no panning at all. Finally, the camera has a built-in mono microphone and there's no microphone jack. Some of the other things you might want to know about the Pentax Q-S1 include the availability of several body colors, and there are a few additional Q-mount lenses available. It's also nice to know that there's an optional Q to K-mount lens adapter, so you can take advantage of a larger selection of lenses. One thing I don't love that camera manufacturers are doing a lot these days is when they make you plug the camera in to charge your battery. That's why I was happy to find a standalone battery charger in my Pentax Q-S1 kit. Another thing I found in the box was the Quick Start Mini Manual, but I actually prefer the full manual, and that's available as a PDF download. Overall, that more complete manual is a bit better, but it still lacks a little bit of detail. Just a few more advanced features you might not expect from a very pocketable changeable lens mirrorless camera like this include a built-in digital level, the fact that you can shoot up to 9 frames in a multiple exposure, and the unique BC position on the shooting mode dial. Now, according to Pentax, BC is a blur control shooting mode position that lets you shoot a picture that looks as if it was taken with a wide open aperture and a very shallow depth of field. It does this by shooting multiple images with different focus positions and merging them together into a single image. Of course, one of the drawbacks to any camera equipped with a small image sensor like a point and shoot is that shallow depth of field is especially hard to capture. Images captured with the BC shooting mode function weren't as dramatic as you'd get from a full-frame camera or even an APS-C size sensor, but they were still far better than I expected. The Pentax Q-S1 is a tiny, changeable lens mirrorless camera with a big feature set. And in spite of the small size, you get surprisingly good photos. So if you're looking for something between a point and shoot and a full-frame DSLR and your pockets are just a little bit too small for the average size mirrorless camera, you should consider this little performer. For B&H and Kelby One, I'm Larry Becker. Thanks for watching.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.
Scott Kelby here, and welcome to this quick tour of our online training. We have hundreds of online classes for you, covering everything from lighting to landscape photography. From portrait photography to sports, we have classes on wedding, automotive photography, shooting, food, fashion, travel, you name it. The most incredible part of this is the price. You get all of this for just $199 a year, or you can pay monthly for just $24.95. 24-hour a day, 7-day a week access from anywhere in the world. I invite you to join with us today and start learning right now.